August 8th, 1999. It's a typical sweltering hot day in the nation's capital. But over on the northeast side of town, D.C. officers are converging on an abandoned vehicle believed to belong to 35-year-old missing woman, Yolanda Baker.
4 days earlier, on August 4th, Yolanda had been reported missing. Her family and authorities were doing everything they could to find her.
They got an anonymous tip saying that there was a car that belonged to a missing person.
This anonymous tipster reported seeing a vehicle matching Yolanda's car in an alleyway in northeast D.C.
Got a key in it. Your side locked?
It's locked.
Back then, in 1999, Northeast was a bit of a rough neighborhood.
Unit 55.
A quick check of the plates confirms it's her car.
Although the car appears empty, what's strange is the engine is still running.
Officers then reach out to Yolanda's family to inform them that her vehicle has been located.
Someone called my number to say it's been sitting there for several days. So I met them there. The police had to jimmy the car open. And when they jimmied the trunk open, they kind of stood back.
The stench from the smell overwhelms them.
Unit 55. You start CSI to our location, please.
I was just hoping that they would find a clue as to what happened to her. And what they found was not her body.
Born and raised in Southeast Washington, D.C., Yolanda Baker grew up in a tight-knit family surrounded by laughter and love.
We had a very big family and very close.
Yolanda was actually the seventh of 8 children. Her father worked as a chef. Her mother was a homemaker.
Despite being from such a large family, Yolanda wasn't easy to ignore.
She had this regalness about herself.
We started calling her Princess, and she grew into the name. She liked to be cuddled, liked to be spoiled like a princess, so it stuck.
After high school, Yolanda enrolled in a critical care nursing program at the Washington Hospital Center, a job everyone agreed suited her personality.
She loved it. She talked about how, caring for, especially the elderly. She loved caring for them and helping them out.
This speaks volumes of her character, of the type of loving person she is, very selfless.
For Yolanda, years of experience in caring for others ultimately kindled a new fire in her heart.
She wanted to be able to raise her own children, be able to love them the way my mother loved us.
Yolanda really wanted to find her Mr. Right. She held on to the belief that she would find her special someone someday.
Then, at the age of 27, a man walked into Yolanda's life that she wouldn't soon forget.
I think somebody's checking you out, sis.
His name was Terrence Barnett.
We had went out with a couple of her girlfriends, and we had a good time. That's when she met Terrence.
Wait, no, don't leave me by myself.
Like Yolanda, Terrence hailed from Washington, D.C.
Hey.
Hi.
Terrence.
Yolanda.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
You have a beautiful smile.
Terrence was a guy who was witty and smart and quite charming.
Terrence must have made quite the impression on Yolanda because from that night forward, they were practically inseparable.
They were definitely a couple. They traveled, they went on different little trips.
How about we go to Ocean City for the weekend?
Yeah?
Yeah.
He would write these very poetic letters to her expressing his love, and she was really smitten by all of the attention he showered her with. So the relationship continued to grow.
In the spring of 1993, Yolanda and Terrence moved in together. Shortly thereafter, Yolanda received some life-changing news.
How you doing?
Baby.
She found out that she was pregnant with twins.
When we found that she was having twins, we all went crazy. We were really happy for her.
Yolanda gave birth to a boy named Sean and a girl named Sarah.
How the kids doing?
Oh, they're little angels.
Oh.
The twins were like her little prince and princess. She bought them everything, took them everywhere. She just was a wonderful parent.
But the trials of parenthood soon put a strain on Yolanda and Terrence's relationship.
There's this stress on Terrence of being a new father, and she sees that it's starting to have an impact on her and Terrence's relationship.
I feel like we never have time for us anymore.
I know it's hard, but that's just part of being a parent, Terrence.
Eventually, they agree to go their separate ways.
Even though she wanted a family with a mother and father for her children, this was not the proper relationship. She was moving on in her life. She wasn't dating or anything, but she was moving forward. Her aim was just to work on her vacation.
But just as Yolanda began to adjust to life as a single parent, tragedy struck.
My mother got sick in April of 1999, and she was like the glue in the family. Within a couple of days, she passed on.
It was shocking. We would think our mother would be here forever.
Yolanda was particularly close to her mother. And when her mother passed, it just devastated her.
She needed a shoulder to cry on as she grieved my mother's death. So she did lean on Terrence. She needed him for comfort.
As the relationship is rekindled, they start seeing each other again. And eventually, she invites Terrence back into the family home.
He wanted to make it right with Yolanda. He wanted to make Princess his wife. He gave Princess a ring to promise that he would do the right thing.
Just like that, it seemed Yolanda and Terrence's romance was back on track. But unfortunately, the couple would never get to tie the knot.
We just have no idea what happened. It doesn't add up that this woman would just leave and not contact anybody.
This is somebody you would not expect to just up and disappear.
For 35-year-old Yolanda Baker, life was finally starting to come back together. She and longtime boyfriend Terrence Barnett had survived a recent rough patch and were as happy as they'd ever been.
They had a relationship. He was taking care of his children.
They seem happy.
However, in August of 1999, a series of strange occurrences would alter Yolanda's life forever.
Hey there.
Hi.
Sorry for the wait.
It's okay.
I see you're here to file a missing persons report.
Yes, it's for my sister. Something's wrong. We haven't seen her in days.
According to Yolanda's family, it all began 3 days earlier, in the early morning hours of August 1st.
My sister Nyla, her sons were producers and promoters. They had just came out with a rap CD, and they had a cabaret to raise more money for them to be able to promote their CD.
Cabarets are standard in D.C. Give a DJ, get a table, bring your own liquor, and you party all night long, you drink. Then when the cabaret is over, everybody goes home.
Most of my family and close friends were there, and Princess was there with Terrence.
They're dancing at the party, they're having a great time.
Around 3 a.m., Yolanda, Terrence, and her friend Daisy finally called it a night and returned to Daisy's home where their children had been staying with a babysitter.
Daisy, I didn't realize how late it was. You mind if I just let the kids sleep over and I'll pick them up in the morning?
Of course, honey. You need the break anyway.
Thank you.
Of course, princess. Love you.
Love you too.
Get them safe, okay?
All right.
But when morning rolled around, the couple never returned to pick up their children.
Hey, girl. It's Daisy. I was just wondering when you would be by to pick up the twins. When you get this message, just give me a call, okay? Love you.
She kept calling to say, "Where are you guys?"
Daisy surmises that perhaps she's a bit hungover from the party the night before. Maybe she overslept, so she calls Terrence.
Hey, Terrence, it's Daisy. Yolanda was supposed to pick up the kids this morning?
What, she never came by? She left this morning. She must be running errands or something. Either way, I'll come and get the kids right now.
Terrence thought Yolanda had left the house, so there became this issue of where's Yolanda?
They were worried about Yolanda. They were all becoming very alarmed because this is not Yolanda. She doesn't just leave like this.
They were calling her and calling and could not get an answer.
The family contacts Yolanda's friends to see if any of them have heard from her. None of them have heard from her either.
Concern continues to mount as days go by without any news from Yolanda.
It really came to a head when she didn't arrive for work. So that's when they started to get the police involved.
Yolanda's family insists something has happened to her and explains to police their belief that Terrence might be involved.
One of the things that raised suspicions was that he told many different stories to many different people who asked where Yolanda was.
When the family first started making inquiries to Terrence, he first told them things like, oh no, she's gone to the store. And then he would say things like, oh, I haven't seen her for days.
Although Terrence's explanation left much to be desired, Yolanda's family acknowledges that the couple seemed happy as could be the night she disappeared.
There was no indication that there was anything wrong. We had a wonderful evening. We were all cordial to him, and he was cordial with us.
After hearing the family story, investigators head to the couple's home to speak to Terrence.
Terrence Barnett? Is this about Yolanda?
Yes. We'd like to have a word with you.
Absolutely.
It's during this initial conversation with police that Terrence says something that helps explain his behavior in the days since Yolanda went missing.
Terrence tells investigators they had been going through a difficult period, and he felt that she needed some time to get away and sort of clear her head. And so he wasn't really that concerned as the family was, because he knew she would be coming back soon.
In his mind, Terrence thought Yolanda may have taken off as payback for bailing on her and the kids the previous year. Maybe she just wanted Terrence to have a taste of his own medicine.
Though Terrence acknowledges a drastic move like this is uncharacteristic for Yolanda, he wouldn't put it past her given all the trouble they've had.
You know where she could have gone?
Maybe she went to see her relatives in Philly? I hate to think about it. I think she was messing with a friend at work.
I think she was seeing someone.
Yeah, I think his name is Dexter.
Police still aren't quite sure what to make of Terrence's story, but he seems to be telling the truth.
With no other viable leads, detectives begin examining the possibility that Yolanda may have left Terrence for another man.
Though families say she would never have left her children, detectives can't help but wonder if she just got tired of dealing with Terrence. And maybe she just took off with someone who could give her what she wanted.
What detectives learn about Yolanda's alleged lover will take them down a bizarre path. One that leads not only to Yolanda's abandoned car, but plunges detectives deep into a cold case that will take more than a decade to solve. In the days following the disappearance of D.C. native Yolanda Baker, family members have voiced concerns that Terrence Barnett, her longtime boyfriend and the father of her children, may be responsible.
Miss Baker's family goes to police and say, look, we believe that this man has something to do with her disappearance.
However, Terrence remains adamant detectives are focusing on the wrong man.
Terrence tells the investigator that Yolanda has become involved with Dexter, a guy at her place of employment. Wanting to follow up on this, they go out to the Washington Hospital Center to talk with Dexter and to talk with co-workers to find out the nature of their relationship.
Yeah, we have reason to believe that you and Yolanda Baker were romantically involved.
Look, I don't know where you get this information about Yolanda and I being involved, but nothing could be further from the truth. I've never even seen her outside of work.
Dexter was surprised to learn that his name had come up during their investigation.
When was the last time that you saw her?
I don't know, honestly. She hasn't shown up for work this week, and we've been covering her shift all week long.
It was clear to detectives that nothing romantic was going on between Dexter and Yolanda, which they ultimately verified through colleagues.
With Dexter proving to be a dead end, detectives broadened their search.
People checked like every hospital, every police station, every place, her job, every place they could think of to see if she was there.
DC's not that big. We talked to everybody that she knows, family members and friends, and she's in none of those locations.
Meanwhile, on August 7th, Yolanda's boyfriend, Terrence Barnett, comes to the police station to fill out a missing persons report of his own.
This is 3 days after the family has already reported her missing. So everyone is confused why Terrence is doing this. Terrence says he just wants to tell his side of the story.
I'm just going to let you know that if you run my name, you're going to find out that Yolanda had a restraining order against me.
Is that so?
Yeah, but it's way more complicated than you think.
Terrence readily admits there was a point in the relationship where things just weren't good between the two of them.
Princess and Terrence were fighting an awful lot, and he would show up on her job. He would show up wherever she was and start fights with her.
It was her family who encouraged her to seek a protective order. It was her family who said, get away from this man. He is no good for you.
The restraining order was ordered by the judge in November of 1998 to be for 1 year. You can't even go to the house, go to the place of employment, or be within 500 feet of that person.
Terrence obeyed the order because if he did not, he would have been arrested.
But Terrence says after her mother passed away in April of 1999, Yolanda had a change of heart.
She wanted to make a home and a family for her children. She didn't want them to be without a father.
He comes back into the house, and they're living together as a family.
See, things wasn't perfect between us, but we was working through it. We wanted to have a family.
Then why did she leave, Terrence? Where is she?
I don't know. I really don't. We got to the house at 3 a.m.
At 7 a.m., she had taken off.
Then why does her family think you have something to do with it?
They don't like me, and they never will.
Terrence seemed genuinely upset about Yolanda's disappearance and wanted to help in any way that he could.
Despite Terrence's willingness to cooperate, police have no choice but to arrest him for violating the restraining order Yolanda had taken out against him.
Stand up, please, sir. Put your hands behind your back.
She let me back in. I don't understand.
Even though Yolanda had made a decision to allow Terrence back into the house and back into the relationship, this was a violation of the restraining order.
With Terrence behind bars, investigators ponder their next move. Meanwhile, Yolanda's family takes to the streets to raise awareness about her disappearance.
They hold candlelight vigils. They press the media. They press police.
We basically put every flyer out there we could.
On August 8th, that vigilance pays off.
They got an anonymous tip saying that there was a car that belonged to a missing person that was in a specific alley in the city.
As detectives press forward, they'll uncover new evidence that only increases their suspect pool.
Their gut was telling them one thing, but the evidence just wasn't adding up.
It creates a lot of questions, but it certainly shifts the investigation into high gear.
On August 8th, 1999, 7 days after the disappearance of 35-year-old mother of two, Yolanda Baker, an anonymous tip has led investigators to her abandoned car in Northeast Washington, D.C.
Yolanda's family met investigators at the location, and to their surprise, it was only a couple of blocks from Yolanda's house.
They found Yolanda's car parked in the alley, running with a single key in the ignition.
The fact that the car is still running suggests that they may have just missed their perp.
Have you checked the trunk yet?
I haven't checked the trunk.
Let's go ahead and get that open.
They had to pry open the trunk of the car. When they did, they found an odor.
The stench overwhelms them, and they know that something's gone awry.
They were bracing themselves because they thought they were going to find a body in there. They didn't. Yolanda was not in the trunk. However, what they did find was a lot of blood.
It was enough blood to say something had happened and someone had clearly bled in this car.
Either they're alive someplace, hurt, or dead.
We were very afraid that something had happened to Princess.
Does it look like a carpet fiber to you?
It does.
Let's go ahead and get that bagged, process the car, look for any DNA, fingerprints, any other blood.
You got it.
As CSIs process the vehicle, investigators ponder two possible theories.
Either Terrence Barnett, a man with a restraining order against him who was also the last one to see Yolanda alive, was responsible for her murder, or Yolanda was carjacked in what at that time was a notoriously dangerous area of D.C.
Back in the 90s, it was very violent. Crack cocaine had moved in, and a lot of murders were being committed. We were the murder capital for the world.
You start to think about, could she have been carjacked in the car, that someone else took the car?
Get off the car. Wait. Get off the car.
While detectives know the carjacking theory is entirely plausible, Yolanda's family still believes Terrence is the person responsible. But it's not until Yolanda's sister, Sherry Hopper, arrives from Virginia later that day that detectives truly understand why the family is so certain Terrence is involved.
Yolanda's sister, Sherry, tells investigators about an incident she witnessed a couple of years ago.
I lost my home, and Yolanda had me and my youngest son move in with her. And one night they had an argument.
Hey, I come here and I work hard every day. I don't got time for this.
You're always crying
I don't
about
have to
it.
take this from you.
A real man doesn't cry about taking care of his family.
Who do you think you are? Don't put your hands on her.
You stay out of this, not concern you.
The hell it does. You put your hands on her again and see what happens.
This is my house.
This is Yolanda's house, and if you don't get out of here right now, I'll call the police.
Before the police got there, he left. And that was the first time that I knew about the abuse. I was upset because I had just came out of an abusive relationship myself, and she just kept apologizing to me. And I'm like, don't you ever feel like you have to apologize for someone putting their hands on you, ever.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and show you out.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
In light of Sherry's shocking story, police dig deeper into Terrence's record and discover the recent restraining order isn't the first documented incident between him and Yolanda.
When the police come to your house 4, 5, 6 times and they take a report, it's on record.
He had been arrested for simple assault, destruction of property, a number of charges related to their relationship.
All signs are leading back to Terrence.
That evening, investigators pay Terrence a visit at the detention center, and to their surprise, he willingly agrees to a DNA sample.
We were like, really? He's gonna really let us do it? Hallelujah.
He consented to everything.
Investigators send Terrence's DNA sample to be analyzed against the forensic evidence collected from Yolanda's car.
They fully expect Terrence's DNA to be all over that car, but that's not exactly the results they got.
Unfortunately, the DNA test confirmed that the blood found in the trunk belonged to Yolanda Baker. But there were additional fingerprints found in the car, and they didn't belong to Terrence Barnett.
The findings of the lab determined that the fingerprints belonged to 2 unknown males.
Police run the fingerprints through a national database and get a hit.
The 2 men whose fingerprints were recovered from Yolanda's car belonged to individuals by the names of Winston Burroughs and Fred Freeman.
When they looked up Winston, they discovered that he had a criminal past. That immediately led them to be suspicious about him.
Now, all of a sudden, this really looks like a deadly carjacking. Winston Burroughs and Fred Freeman become prime suspects.
Investigators quickly tracked down Winston and Fred in D.C., not far from where Yolanda's car was found.
The history of domestic violence really had investigators convinced that Terrence was the guilty party. But now, in light of new evidence, it would seem that he may be innocent after all.
Could it be possible Terrence is telling investigators the truth? And what role did the 2 new prime suspects play in Yolanda's disappearance? Detectives are about to discover, in a case shrouded in mystery, what you see is not always what you get.
Just when it looks like this mystery might be solved, it takes another, even more bizarre turn.
It's been a week since Yolanda Baker's car was found abandoned in Northeast Washington, D.C. To the surprise of friends, family, and investigators, fingerprint evidence recovered from the vehicle hasn't tied her boyfriend, Terrence Barnett, to her disappearance, but rather to a pair of convicted criminals named Winston Burroughs and Fred Freeman.
Winston definitely had a criminal history, had been involved in criminal incidents involving vehicles, and definitely had an arrest history and a history with police.
Fred was a known associate of Winston Burroughs and had an extensive criminal history of his own.
With both men now in custody, detectives question Winston Burroughs first.
I think you know why you're sitting here right now.
No, nobody's telling me nothing.
This is about a missing persons case. Yolanda Baker, we found your prints all over her car. Did you carjack her?
No, man.
They went through a heck of an interrogation. Where'd the car come from? How'd you get this car? Who gave it to you?
He said he had no idea whose car it was. He just found the car abandoned on the street, and he saw the keys, and they were able to drive off.
You say you found the car, And you took it?
I drove it around for a few days to do errands and stuff. Then I ditched it.
Errands. That's what you do when you steal a car. Run errands.
And what about the blood in the trunk?
Blood? What do you mean blood?
What's your connection to Fred Freeman?
He's just a guy I know.
Was this guy you know with you when you took this car?
No. I gave it to him.
He knew that his friend Fred needed this car. He passed the car off to Fred to drive. And Fred started driving the car.
There were a lot of suspicious circumstances about how they got the car, what they did with the key, how long they'd been using it.
When detectives turned to Fred Freeman, he also claims to know nothing about Yolanda's disappearance.
Did you kill Yolanda Baker?
No. I needed a car for a few days. Winston said he had one. He gave it to me. I was driving it around and it started to stink, so I ditched it.
Detectives hammer away at Fred, but that's his story. I didn't steal this car. I didn't hurt anyone. And he seems to be telling the truth.
As investigators listened, they theorized that perhaps Winston saw Yolanda driving through the area and decided to carjack her. Things perhaps went wrong and he killed her.
So then he gives the car to Fred Freeman, knowing Fred has no idea there's a pool of blood in the trunk.
He's starting to look more like a suspect, and he's starting to look like a person who will want to distance himself from any connection to the car.
But just as investigators seem to be zeroing in on Winston Burroughs, Yolanda's sister Dion comes forward with new information.
After Terrence Barnett was arrested for violating his restraining order on August 7th, Yolanda's family took in the couple's 5-year-old twins.
According to Yolanda's sister Dion, Yolanda's children had said something recently that caught the family's attention.
One of my nieces was talking with the twins, and she asked them, was anything different in the house when you came back home? She said, no, just mommy's rug in her bedroom. So she said, okay. So I then called the police and told them it was missing out of the bedroom. Can you please double check and see what's going on?
The significance of this statement isn't lost on investigators.
They had found carpet fibers in the trunk of Yolanda's car.
Investigators acquire a search warrant and immediately focus their attention on Yolanda and Terrence's master bedroom.
Although the carpeting that was in the closet was still there, the carpeting in the room had been removed.
That's when you would start bringing the big guns like the luminol to look for blood.
And when they do, the results are shocking.
You have a room that's obviously been cleaned with bleach. And, bleach stains on Terrence's clothing, bleach stains on the wall. And then when you look further, you actually find blood and, more importantly, blood spatter.
There was a blood spatter on the ceiling light and over the door of the bedroom.
Blood spatter occurs when people are in a violent struggle. And I'm striking somebody, and the blood is cast off of the victim.
There was blood not only in the bedroom, but a trail that went down the stairs. There is a suspicion now, of course, that this is the murder scene.
Their working theory at the time was they got into an argument, and there was a violent struggle within the room, with Yolanda getting the worst end of it. I'm sure that he wrapped her up in something just to get her out of the trunk, and then gotten the carpet out later.
From there, the most likely scenario was that Terrence dumped Yolanda's body somewhere and then ditched her car.
What Terrence was hoping was that he would be able to park the car nearby, somebody would steal it, and put further distance between him and the car itself.
Which would explain how Winston Burroughs and Fred Freeman's fingerprints wound up in Yolanda's vehicle.
At the same time, Winston and Fred have much more extensive criminal histories than Terrence, so they can't be ruled out entirely.
Without concrete proof that Yolanda was murdered, the mountain of blood evidence found in the home is still not enough to formally charge Terrence.
A no-body case is one of the most difficult cases for prosecutors. How do you prove to a jury that the person is dead? How do you prove to a jury that the person was murdered?
The DA felt like she didn't want to proceed without a body.
You can't take someone to trial, lose, get more evidence, and take them to trial again. That's double jeopardy.
As the case turns colder by the minute, Detectives have one shot to bring Yolanda's potential killer to justice before he slips through the cracks.
How do we prove this is a murder? It left the investigators with little doubt that they had to be looking for a body.
This is the type of case that when it goes cold, it goes really cold.
In the weeks following the disappearance of 35-year-old Yolanda Baker, detectives in Washington, D.C. have uncovered evidence which strongly suggests the young mother had been murdered in her own home by her longtime boyfriend, Terrence Barnett.
Because of the past violence between Terrence and Yolanda, the suspicion is that something happened inside the house that led to Yolanda's death.
However, without a body, prosecutors say they can't move forward with the case.
Prosecutors in the country were just not doing homicide cases where there wasn't a body.
While the odds of finding Yolanda's body are low, both investigators and family members refuse to give up.
They organized search parties to scour parks, vacant lots, all the areas someone might use to dispose of a body.
With the searches coming up empty, Terrence is released from custody.
He was locked up for 4 months as a result of violating the probation condition.
We were floored. We didn't understand why they couldn't arrest him. Why didn't they have enough evidence from what was found in the house and all the circumstances?
As time goes on, 2000, 2001, it becomes less likely that a body is going to be found.
I got temporary custody of the children, but it was tough. I'm also praying that something will happen, that they will find the evidence to move forward and try this case.
It's always frustrating when you feel like you know that a person committed a crime, but you just can't get that one little bit to get over the hurdle to take them to trial.
Terrence moves on with his life. He remarries, he starts this new relationship.
But as the years continue to pass, Yolanda's family remains vigilant in their fight for justice.
They were very dedicated. They were right there pushing for this case and doing everything that they could to help bring information to the investigators.
Finally, in 2009, their determination pays off.
The case really heated up in 2009 because that's when a new set of cold case detectives were assigned to the case.
The original detectives had not only done a really good job processing the crime scene and doing the initial investigation, they had maintained the documentation and the evidence, so we actually had something to work with.
As detectives begin re-interviewing past witnesses, they uncover a new bit of information.
Yolanda's sister, Sherry Hopper, brings up a piece of testimony she alleges she gave in the early stages of the investigation, but somehow slipped through the cracks.
Sherry had been driving through town on the evening of August 1st, the same day Yolanda came home at 3 a.m. from a CD party. And she saw Yolanda's car, but Yolanda wasn't with it.
Her sister recalled that she had seen someone who looked like Terrence the night of August 1st, 1999, removing something from the trunk of Yolanda's car and actually throwing it over the bridge.
I described who I saw on the bridge that night to a T.
Of course, understandably, there was some skepticism about it. Why hadn't she told people about that right away? How had she been able to recall that many years later in the exact time? Ultimately, though, both the police and prosecutors concluded that it was, in fact, credible.
She saw who she thought was Terrence on the bridge, taking a bag out of the trunk of the car. She didn't at first think anything of it, but as she was thinking back about this, she realized later that Yolanda had gotten this new car, and she believed that that was the car she saw on the bridge that night.
It was credible enough to eliminate Winston Burroughs and Fred Freeman as suspects once and for all.
The prosecutor focused on cold cases. She was one of the top litigators within the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Washington, D.C.
The prosecutor felt like she had a good shot at conviction.
On June 23, 2009, nearly 10 years after Yolanda first went missing, D.C. police arrest Terrence and formally charge him with Yolanda's murder.
He's shocked because he thought far too much time has passed for them to convict me. He's shocked, but he's taken into custody.
Finally, relief. You're more at peace because now you know that what he's done to her, he can't do to anyone else.
We all just thank God that finally Princess was going to have some justice.
On March 11th, 2010, the case finally goes to trial and immediately starts making headlines.
Two of the strongest attorneys, period, in Washington, D.C. were fighting over a cold case where there's no body.
Prosecutors theorize that it all began in the early morning hours of August 1st, 1999, the last time Yolanda Baker was seen alive.
Who you waving at, huh? Who's he? That's a relative?
He's just a friend.
Oh, he's just a friend?
Most people initially claimed that Yolanda and Terrence were having fun at the party. But there were some suggestions that Terrence was jealous and frustrated. Yolanda had been talking to some of their male friends.
According to prosecutors, when Terrence and Yolanda returned home, his unhappiness boiled over into unbridled rage.
What do you think you're doing talking to guys like that, huh?
What are you even talking about?
What I'm talking about, you disrespecting me.
God.
Huh? Trying to make me look crazy?
You're acting crazy.
Oh, I'm acting crazy?
He would often irrationally get angry about things Yolanda did. He, of course, had the prior history of domestic violence with her.
You think it's a game?
Ha, ha, ha!
It ain't funny.
Yes, it is.
Huh?
You're hilarious.
Am I hilarious? It's okay now, huh?
Her life ended in that bedroom.
Terrence got her out to the car, put her in the car. He also had to clean up in order to try to hide his tracks. Once Terrence got rid of the body and got rid of the carpet, he just dumped the car in a neighborhood with the key in it, hoping that somebody would steal it. And he had his wish granted.
To support their theory, prosecutors introduce a mountain of physical evidence.
The amount of blood found in the car, amount of blood found in the house, and just the guesstimation of blood that would have been in the bedroom. And with the carpet fibers and all, they can put those things together. This says one thing, it's foul play.
To bolster her case even more, the prosecutor calls Yolanda's sister, Sherry Hopper, to the stand to testify.
Seeing this gentleman on the bridge with a plastic bag, and I was like, yeah, why we chopped her up and disposed of her body that way.
It's compelling testimony, but defense attorneys waste no time going after it.
She made this observation and didn't tell a soul. You're thinking about ways to assist in the investigation, and the first thing that would come to your mind would be, gee, let me tell the police that I saw her boyfriend throwing a bag out of the trunk of a car. My theory really boiled down to that this was an unsolved mystery. So the blood evidence from the bedroom, I mean, given the fact that these two had been violent with one another in the past, it's even more unsurprising that you would find blood in their bedroom.
Also, none of Terrence's DNA was found in the car. But remember, they did find two other gentlemen's DNA in the car.
There was not evidence that he was guilty beyond reasonable doubt.
On March 30th, after 3 weeks of testimony and 3 days of jury deliberation, the judge announces the verdict.
When the jury came back with the verdict, we just all grabbed each other.
When the verdict came back that he was guilty, I felt like he got what he deserved.
Many of the family members just break out into tears. Tears of joy, tears of sadness, applause. The judge sentenced him to 20 years to life.
December 12th, 2009, 1:15 a.m. In a townhouse on a quiet street in Chicago's South Side, landlord Charles Thomas is asleep in bed when he's suddenly jolted awake.
He got up and heard another loud bang. Realized at this point that it was a gunshot.
He looked down the steps and he saw somebody scurrying away.
Stephanie! Concerned for his first floor tenant, Charles races down the stairs.
Stephanie, are you in there?
What he discovers outside 40-year-old Stephanie Reed's apartment sets off alarm bells.
He noticed that Stephanie's door was broken.
No one answered, so he walked in the door.
Stephanie!
It's in Stephanie's bedroom that Charles makes a heartbreaking discovery.
He found his tenant lying face down on the floor, soaked in blood.
Charles frantically dials 911.
Chicago Emergency Mahaffey.
Hey, I need the police immediately.
What's the problem?
Miss, she's laying face down. Somebody kicked in the front door. Get the police out here, now.
Within minutes, first responders arrive at the scene.
She has been shot twice, once in the head and once in the chest.
News.
231. Send out detectives, forensics.
But as police secure the scene, they have no idea that Stephanie Reed will be just one of several victims to fall prey to a killer this cold Chicago night.
It was a race against time.
Born on August 1st, 1969, Stephanie Reed grew up in a housing project on the south side of Chicago. The eldest of 4 children, Stephanie took her role as big sister seriously.
When Mom was away, she felt in charge. She was no pushover.
That can-do, caring attitude served Stephanie well in high school.
She was pretty good in school. She was into sports. She was popular and all that. She was a real pretty girl.
After graduating in 1987, Stephanie soon got married and had a beautiful baby girl. While the marriage didn't last, Stephanie felt life was complete with her daughter by her side.
Stephanie was raising my niece on her own. They had a good relationship. They would always set aside certain dates and days. We're going to the movies, we're going shopping.
To provide for her family, Stephanie took a customer service job with a local cable company.
She didn't go to college, she just started working right away.
Slowly but surely, Stephanie climbed the career ladder. But raising her daughter was always her #1 priority.
She was a devoted mother and really supported her daughter in everything that she did. She loved being a mom.
When her daughter entered her teens, Stephanie decided it was time to start dating again. And in 2005, friends introduced her to James J.D. Ameson.
So you were saying you're from the north side?
Sure did.
Oh, awesome. Well, I love Chicago. So they said that you have kids, right?
That's right. What about you?
Well, I have a girl.
Stephanie and JD had an instant connection. When Stephanie gave him her number, things just really took off from there.
Over the next few months, the couple's chemistry seemed to intensify.
Hold up.
I'm preparing our snack. Wait. My brother's gonna hear us.
What y'all in here doing?
He was pretty cool. He was really respectful to my mom and, different things of that nature.
It was clear to Stephanie's family that she was extremely happy.
Unfortunately, not long into the relationship, JD lost his job at a local furniture store.
He had gotten into a disagreement because of some work that he wasn't paid for, and his boss fired him after the altercation.
He took the firing really hard, so much so that he went into a depression. And anything that Stephanie did or said just couldn't break down the walls he put up.
The easy intimacy the couple shared soon evaporated. And in the fall of 2009, after nearly 4 years together, they decided it was time to separate.
Regardless of the breakup, her family was confident that she would find happiness again.
She was beautiful, inside and out.
But now, just 2 months later, Chicago police find themselves huddled over Stephanie's lifeless body, wondering how she could have met such a horrible fate.
The crime seems random, but news of a 911 call soon changes everything.
There could be an armed gunman on the loose in Chicago.
A guy pulled out in a black car and pulled out a gun.
Single mom Stephanie Reed rediscovered love in the arms of James J.D. Ameson. And although neither would ever forget their time together, after 4 years, the couple decided it was time to move on.
They grew apart, but Stephanie was really excited to start dating again.
Then at 1:15 a.m. on December 12, 2009, Stephanie's life came to an end when an unknown intruder entered her Southside home and gunned her down.
He shot her once in the chest and once in the head.
As Chicago police secure the scene, Stephanie's brother Jeff walks over from his mother's house across the street to get answers.
Sir, please stay back.
What? This is my sister's house. What's going on?
I can't answer any questions. I'm sorry, sir.
I knew that they were protecting the crime scene. That was in my head. I was like, oh my God. Like I said, is she alive or is she dead in there?
Please.
Sir, I'm sorry. She's gone.
That was the worst night of my life.
As Stephanie's family tries to cope with the shock of what's happened, investigators inside Stephanie's residence are assessing the crime scene.
So, our gunman enters here, makes his way back to the bedroom, and fires 2 shots at our victim. What you got there?
Looks like a 9mm casing.
The broken doors leading into Stephanie's apartment suggest a possible motive for the crime.
This clearly looks like a home invasion.
Police speculated that whoever did this assumed that no one was home. This is for 2 reasons. 1, it would take a tremendous amount of time to break down 2 doors. And 2, it will make a lot of noise.
Everything most likely went to hell after the robber discovered that Stephanie was home.
So that could explain why there were still valuables in the home, like Stephanie's TV and her computer. He must have fled in a panic.
But with no valuables missing, detectives can't be sure the attack on Stephanie wasn't personal.
Had Stephanie made some enemies that were thirsty for revenge?
Hoping to fill in the blanks, detectives turn to the man who first reported the crime, Stephanie's landlord, Charles Thomas.
Can you tell us anything about what the perp looked like?
All I saw was the back of his head, and he was wearing dark clothes.
Okay. Is Stephanie having any issues with anybody?
Not that I know of.
Was she seeing anyone?
Well, there was this guy named JD that would sometimes come around, but I haven't seen him in a while.
Would you happen to know his last name?
I'm sorry, but you can ask the family.
But with Stephanie's grieving family too emotional to interview, detectives begin canvassing the neighborhood for potential eyewitnesses. And although no one reports seeing the actual shooting take place, one resident, DeAndre Davis, and his cousin Laverne describe a terrifying encounter that occurred earlier that night.
The witness describes how he called 911 immediately after an incident where he and his cousin had been threatened by a gunman.
Chicago emergency.
My little cousin, just when she came out the house, a guy pulled up on her in a black car, just pulled out a gun and told her to get the in the house.
You got a license plate number on this vehicle? No, man, all I seen was that gun, so I got the hell out the way.
The man described how when they were getting ready to leave, a black sedan pulled up right beside them.
The female witness looked in the car to see if it was someone she knew. At that point, the driver leaned out the window and pointed a gun at her head.
Get back!
You can take my purse.
I don't want your purse. Get in the house. Come on, let's go. We ran back inside and called 911.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna die. It happened so fast.
And then nobody showed up, and we still saw the car out there.
15 minutes later, DeAndre peeked outside to look for police. But again, he saw the gunman.
They saw the black car parked in front of Stephanie Reed's house.
He called 911 again, but before completing the call, the perp had already sped off.
We don't need no police. He's gone. He's gone.
Thank you. Bye now.
DeAndre and Laverne's statements point to the gunman in the black car as the man who shot Stephanie. But there's one piece of information that puzzles detectives.
This guy turned down money from one of the witnesses, so it didn't seem robbery related. So why point a gun at strangers, not take their money, and then drive down the street to kill Stephanie Reed?
All right, thank you for your time.
But before investigators can answer that question, they receive word that the killer has struck again.
You think you're watching a movie. You can't believe that this is actually your life and it's a reality.
In the aftermath of Stephanie Reed's shocking murder, Chicago police have learned that an armed and dangerous man was seen outside Stephanie's apartment prior to the shooting.
A neighbor and his family member reported being threatened by this person before Stephanie's murder. It was pretty terrifying for them.
It didn't seem like this man was motivated by money. So was Stephanie's murder some kind of random crazed attack, or was he targeting her specifically?
With Stephanie's family finally ready to open up, investigators circle back for answers.
I know this is a hard time for you right now, but it's our understanding that Stephanie had recently been seeing a gentleman by the name of JD.
Yeah, that's him.
You wouldn't happen to know what his last name is, would you?
It's Emerson.
The family tells detectives that JD and Stephanie had been together for nearly 4 years, and they had just recently broken up.
When did they break up?
It was sometime in October.
That's when Stephanie's brother drops a bombshell.
I think she found out he just wasn't being faithful.
That's what was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Now detectives wonder if JD was the shooter after all, and that this was a crime of passion.
Okay, one last question. Do you know if JD drove a black sedan?
No.
Oh, he had a white car.
This just throws the investigators for a loop. Here's a guy who seems like a promising suspect, but he doesn't own a car matching the description of the one seen in the neighborhood that night.
Thank you for your time.
As Chicago investigators put out a bolo for James J.D. Amison, they soon realize they'll have to step in line. Just 15 miles away, investigators from the Maywood Police Department are looking for the same man for a different shooting.
Detective Randy Brown.
I got a call reference to a man shot. Several officers were on the scene. James Johnson was taken to Loyola Hospital with a gunshot wound to the neck. He immediately went to surgery.
Detective Brown learns that the victim's wife, Elaine, witnessed the shooting and identified the gunman as her stepson, James J.D. Amison. With no time to lose, Detective Brown races to the hospital to speak to Elaine.
She was very emotionally upset. She was crying. She really loved her husband.
No, this is a bad time, but I need to ask you a few questions.
I understand.
Can you tell me a little bit about the husband's relationship with the son?
Elaine tells Detective Brown that her husband's relationship with his oldest son, James Jr., aka JD, wasn't always easy.
James was a bus driver with the city of Chicago. He had a grown daughter from his marriage with Elaine, and then he had 2 sons from former girlfriends.
Though everyone knew James loved his son, he and JD just couldn't see eye to eye on the direction JD should take his life.
He didn't have the best relationship with my dad.
That may be why he used his mother's last name, Amison, instead of his father's last name, which was Johnson.
Elaine explains that after the unexpected passing of JD's mother in 1988, much to his father's chagrin, JD started down a dark path.
So he quit school after 8th grade, was depressed during his adolescent years, and had thoughts of suicide.
My dad really wanted him to come live with us, but he stayed with his grandmother. That's when he started doing the illegal activities.
By 1995, JD had already been arrested for drug possession, carjacking, armed robbery, and even aggravated kidnapping.
During his 20s, James was incarcerated for the better part of the decade for very violent felonies.
After James was released from prison, he decided he wanted to make more positive choices in his life.
My brother did want to turn his life around. He was trying to rebuild that relationship with my dad, and he started working consistently.
And Elaine credits a 30-year-old single mother named Tashika Smith with giving JD the motivation to stay on the straight and narrow.
They had met not long after he got out of prison.
You could tell she did love my brother, and she was the one for him.
JD and Tashika wed in 2003, and for the next 6 years, everything seemed perfect.
Elaine explains that suddenly in 2009, JD and Tashika separated, and the reason was truly bizarre.
JD thought that his wife was having him followed.
In the wake of these allegations, Elaine explains she was fearful that her stepson had become emotionally unhinged. That's when Elaine recounts the horrific events that unfolded just hours earlier.
JD came to the house. Is everything okay?
I need to talk to Dad. Where is he?
Steve!
Elaine says that as she followed her stepson, he started shouting at his father.
What's going on?
I know what you did with Tashika.
What are you talking about?
He believed that his father was having relationships with his wife.
Boy, that's ridiculous.
I don't believe you, not for a second.
JD, you don't have to do this. Honey, call the police.
What did you do?
Get out of my way.
He said to his stepmother, if anybody move, anybody do anything, I'll shoot you. And then James walked out of the house in a calm manner.
It's a terrifying story, but that's when Elaine shares one last piece of information with Detective Brown, a revelation that dramatically ups the stakes of the situation.
And then he said, Tashika is dead.
Thank you for your time. I'll be in touch with you.
Tashika lived in Stager, a suburb of Chicago, which is about 35 miles south of the city.
We contacted the Stager Police Department to do a premise check.
Detective Brown also contacts Chicago PD to join forces in the search for J.D. Amison. As Maywood and Chicago investigators share information about their prime suspect, the Stager Police Department arrives at Tashika's residence.
My officers went to the apartment, banged on the door several times, nobody answered.
Police!
They were able to make entry into the apartment.
What they find in the living room confirms everyone's worst fears.
Tashika Smith was laying on the couch, covered up by a purple sheet. She was deceased.
We got a body.
We got 2 kids sleeping in the back bedroom, too.
Officers find Tashika's 2 young daughters asleep, unharmed and unaware that their mother has been murdered.
They were both transported to the station while Child Protective Services contacted their next of kin, Tashika's sister.
Soon after, Detective Feynman enters the scene and takes a closer look at the victim.
What do we got?
It was determined that the cause of death was asphyxiation due to strangulation. I observed that she had a small, jagged cut along her neck here. It appeared superficial to me. It's increasingly clear to investigators that J.D. likely murdered Tashika, then shot his father, and is quite possibly responsible for the murder of Stephanie Reed as well.
As police continue searching Tashika's residence, a new wrinkle emerges.
We checked the parking lot for her car, couldn't find it, so we got a bolo out on it.
They realized her Chevy Blazer was missing, and they made the assumption that JD had taken that car.
However, the car spotted outside Stephanie's apartment was a black sedan. So who did that car belong to? And could someone else be in danger?
Clearly, something snapped in this guy's head.
Police realize that JD has been living 2 separate lives, one in Stager with Tashika Smith, and another on Chicago's South Side with Stephanie Reed.
Was it something about this love triangle or the fact that both of these relationships seemed to be unraveling that prompted JD to allegedly go on this killing spree?
With 3 different police departments on the hunt, the search for J.D. Amison intensifies, and soon a new lead will add another twist to this already tangled investigation.
It was almost like an out-of-body experience, just trying to take it in.
In the early morning hours of December 12, 2009, detectives from the Chicago, Maywood, and Stager police departments are doing everything in their power to track down James J.D. Amison.
JD was effectively living 2 separate lives. He had this relationship with his wife Tashika as well as with Stephanie Reed. Now, both women are dead and his dad is in critical condition.
For some unknown reason, James believed that Tashika was sleeping with his father.
He thought that Tashika Smith, his father James Johnson, and his former girlfriend Stephanie Reed had conspired together somehow against him. There was no evidence to support that.
As officers scour the streets of Chicago in search of J.D., detectives continue building their case against their wanted man. Meanwhile, on the west side of town, Detective Feynman with the Stager Police Department questions Tashika Smith's family to obtain more details about her relationship with J.D.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions. Can you tell me about your sister's initial relationship with JD?
According to the family, they've been having problems since JD lost his job in fall of 2009.
To cope with the monetary stressors in his life, James began smoking marijuana and drinking.
Family members say that JD's downward spiral triggered bizarre delusions about his wife.
He was consistently thinking that she was either controlling him or cheating on him.
He did talk about how he felt paranoid. He felt like Tashika had someone following him. He was angry.
He had a very bad temper, and the police had to be called out for several domestic disturbances before.
It got to the point where Tashika had separated from JD, and now there was talk of divorce.
Tashika's family explains through it all, though, Tashika tried to maintain a civil relationship with JD for the sake of the children, and even let him occasionally borrow her car.
And when was the last time she let him borrow the car?
Today?
JD borrowed Tashika's Chevy Blazer in the afternoon, so she got a ride home from work from her sister.
He got in about 7, and Tashika invited him in for dinner with the kids.
The revelation that JD was at his estranged wife's home on the night of her murder only bolsters investigators' case against him. But as Detective Feynman is finishing up with Tashika's family, he gets a phone call from dispatch.
A woman named Terry Williams called police to report that the man that they were looking for had stolen her car.
Got it.
She was concerned that James would come back to kill her.
When Staker police arrive, they find the terrified 31-year-old woman inside her apartment with her 3-year-old son unharmed. A shaken Terry then explains what happened.
Her and James had had an off-and-on relationship.
He had a son with Terry while he was still married to Tashika.
So apparently, JD, who had killed his wife and shot his dad because he believed the two were having an affair, was actually in 2 serious relationships of his own with Terry Williams and the now deceased Stephanie Reed.
Terry says she didn't know JD was married when they met, and the truth only came out after she informed him she was pregnant. But regardless of this unsettling information, Terry decided to continue a relationship with JD because she felt it was best for their child.
It was important for James to be a part of his son's life.
So to Terry, when JD stopped by her apartment at 9:30 on the night of December 11th, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, at least not at first.
You know, he really misses you.
I haven't seen him in a long time. It's good to see him.
Well, I'm not really feeling the best, so I'm just gonna go lay down.
Terry left James in the living room.
Terry says when she woke up a few hours later, JD was gone and her son was asleep in his bed. But then Terry got a phone call that would cast her child's father in an entirely different light.
Hello?
A relative told her that James had shot his father in the neck.
What? She went to the window and noticed that her vehicle was not on the street.
And my car's gone.
Her black sedan was missing, and in its place was Tashika's Chevy Blazer.
At this point, Terry called police.
For investigators, Terry Williams' statement leads them to just one possible conclusion.
He went to her home with the intention of switching vehicles in order to throw the police off.
Do you know anybody by the name of Stephanie Reed?
Oh, yeah. I got a call the other day from an unknown number.
The woman on the other end of the line was Stephanie Reed.
Stephanie told Terry that she and JD had been in a relationship for 4 years, and she had just discovered that Terry had her own relationship with JD.
Terry said as they talked, she told Stephanie that JD was actually married to another woman. To Stephanie, it was like a punch in the gut. She had no idea.
That was the last straw to Stephanie. He kept calling, trying to come back. She was adamant about, not letting him back this time.
It's at that point, Terry's demeanor shifts to panic.
Oh my God. We need to warn Stephanie about JD. She could be in danger.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you. She was found murdered this evening.
But as Terry Williams recoils at the thought of Stephanie's murder, investigators can't help but wonder, are they one step closer to this nightmare being over? Or are there more women in JD's life and potentially more victims? In Greater Chicago, it appears James J.D. Ameson has gone on a killing spree that targeted his father, James Sr., his estranged wife, Tashika Smith, and his ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Reed.
My brother felt that everyone was trying to get him. Of course, it wasn't true, so it's like he had concocted this story in his head. No one knows where it come from, why he thought that, and I just feel like it was just something going on in his head throughout the years that we missed.
With J.D. still on the loose, investigators from 3 different police departments fear more murders may loom on the horizon.
Where and who will be the next target?
But before the day breaks, the answer to that question comes from inside a Southside Chicago gentlemen's club.
There was a bouncer out front checking IDs.
You good?
And all of a sudden, there was an African-American man who tried to walk past him into the club without paying.
Well, where do you think you're going, man?
Wherever I want. He had brandished a handgun, and the bouncer let him in.
All right, easy, man, easy.
It was JD.
Once inside the dimly lit club, JD begins terrorizing everyone in his path.
Watch out, bro. Where you going, sucker?
I mean, you tripping, bro.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
You better get back, girl.
At this point, club security descends on JD.
There was an exchange of gunfire.
A security person was able to shoot Mr. Amison in the leg. James Amison was transported to a nearby hospital in police custody.
As JD is wheeled into surgery, news that this alleged spree killer is finally off the streets comes as a welcome relief.
I was relieved that they arrested him, but at the same time, I'm just still trying to understand what was going on.
What propelled JD Amison to embark on such a horrific string of violence?
I don't know if James had snapped or James had multiple relationships himself, that maybe he just lost reality and proceeded to go on his killing streak.
Was it a fear of rejection or paranoia, or maybe both? It's only after JD gets out of surgery on December 13th that this answer starts to come to light.
Once JD is stabilized, detectives from the Chicago, Maywood, and Stager police finally come face to face with their prime suspect.
He was interviewed by detectives on all three cases from the three different towns that they were committed in.
Mr. Amison, we're here to read you your Miranda rights.
To investigators' surprise, JD immediately waives his Miranda rights.
James was like, I'm gonna tell you what exactly happened. I have no problem with detail.
In JD's mind, none of his targets that night were innocent victims.
They thought I was stupid. I knew what they were doing.
He told them that they could find a bunch of DVDs in the closet of his apartment that proved 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿 and his father were having sex.
Oh yeah, you just check that closet and you'll find what you're looking for. And you know, they all tried to kill me too. I heard them talking just before all this went down.
James had supposedly slipped a tape recorder into 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿's pocket and overheard 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿 and Stephanie plot to kill him for his life insurance money.
They thought they could get the drop on me, but I ain't stupid. That's when I decided they all had to die.
JD says it began on the evening of December 11th after he and 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿 had dinner together.
JD says that he waited until his children went into their rooms at around 9 p.m. Then he confronted his wife.
What's going on?
I know what you did with my dad. I know about the insurance plot.
What are you talking about? Why are you acting like this?
I'm gonna kill you and I'm gonna get away with it.
He chose to strangle her instead of shooting her. He wanted to prevent the two children sleeping from waking up hearing mommy screaming or hearing a gunshot. He talked about choking her with such force. He thought he broke one of his own ribs.
James thought that she might be playing like she was dead. James went to the kitchen, grabbed a steak knife, and came back to slit 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿's throat.
In a lot of the other interviews that I've done, suspects will go into a little bit of detail about the crime, but not to the extent that James went.
As suspected, JD confirms that he then went to Terry Williams' house, stole Terry's black sedan, and left 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿's stolen blazer in its place to throw detectives off his trail.
He was very calculated.
JD explains that his next stop was the home of his father, James Sr.
JD's account of how he attacked his father was particularly bone-chilling.
At no time did he express any remorse.
We told him that his father was still alive.
Your father didn't die. He's still alive.
What? Are you serious?
At that point, he was begging to be released from the hospital just for a few minutes so he could go take care of things. And then he would come turn himself in.
James Amison wanted to go back to finish the job and kill Mr. Johnson.
Ultimately, JD realizes that the police are not going to release him from custody, so he continued with his deranged account of the shootings. And next on the list was Stephanie Reed.
JD thought the strangers who he had held up at gunpoint near Stephanie Reed's house were all working with Stephanie and Tashika to kill him. Thought they were all assassins.
He was compelled by his delusions and his paranoid rage to commit these crimes, and his behavior was irrational.
He used force to get into Stephanie's apartment.
JD, what are you doing here? Look, I thought I told you that you were...
He shot her in the chest.
She begged for mercy. James shot her in the head and left.
As for why he held up the gentleman's club, JD claims he was trying to hunt down his former boss, who fired him back in October. When he didn't find his boss at the club, he simply seized on an opportunity.
We said, well, shoot, I'm gonna give me some money.
Investigators hope JD's chilling confession will be enough to put him behind bars for life.
The defendant was charged with the murder of Tashika Smith, the murder of Stephanie Reed, the attempted murder of James Johnson, and the armed robbery of the strip joint.
But even with this mountain of evidence, as the case heads to trial, there's a tangible fear that J.D. Amos will never spend a single day in prison for his crimes.
The defendant is pleading that he was insane.
We all come to the conclusion that he snapped.
James J.D. Amoson's violent rampage through Chicago and its suburbs has left the city reeling, and the families of his 3 victims searching for answers.
I would never expect in a million years that my brother would shoot my dad, you know, and also go on a murder spree.
To shoot your father, to kill your wife and your ex-girlfriend, and don't have no second doubts about it, that's cold-blooded.
He had a mental breakdown.
And although JD's father, James Sr., survives, his life is forever changed.
My dad was paralyzed from the neck down.
He had no mobility at all. All he could do was move his head.
Adding insult to injury is the fact that JD's motives for his killing spree appear to be completely unfounded.
There was no relationship between his wife and his father. She was just a daughter-in-law, and that was it.
Police never found any sex tapes, audio recordings, or anything to prove JD's claim that his wife, Tashika, was having an affair with his father. Nor was she plotting with his girlfriend, Stephanie, to kill him.
Apparently, Tashika and Stephanie didn't even know each other. It was all just a paranoid delusion.
Tragically, as the case winds its way through the court system, J.D. Amoson's crime spree claims one last life.
Unfortunately, his father, James Johnson, died from his injuries in January of 2011.
It becomes challenging at times. My brother has shot my dad, so now my dad is gone.
So the attempt murder charge on James Johnson was upgraded to first-degree murder.
June 25, 2012, in a Cook County courtroom, the trial of James J.D. Amoson for the murders of Tashika Smith, Stephanie Reed, and James Johnson Sr. finally gets underway.
The state's attorney decided that it would be stronger to try all 3 murder cases together.
So we combined the Will County murder of Tashika Smith with the Cook County murders of James Johnson and Stephanie Reed for one trial.
A lot of times in cases where there's multiple jurisdictions, one department seems to overshadow the others and takes over. In this case, everybody came together and worked excellent together.
When the district attorney takes the floor, he describes J.D. as a calculated man on a mission to murder.
The state's theory of the case was that James had an execution plan to kill his wife, his father, his ex-girlfriend, and former boss.
In his mind, these were people that had wronged him. They were out to get him, and he wanted revenge.
He said, I'm gonna kill this person, I'm gonna kill this person, I'm gonna kill this person. James truly believed he had a job to do. James proceeded until he got caught.
The prosecution and defense agree that the evidence against J.D. is overwhelming, but the defense still has a strategy that could set their client free.
James's attorneys assert their defense of not guilty by reason of insanity.
Under Illinois law, In order for an insanity defense to be established, the defendant had to be so mentally ill that he could not tell the difference between right and wrong at the time of these crimes that he committed that night.
To prove their case, the defense calls a forensic psychologist to the stand to testify.
A mental health expert did indicate that the defendant was suffering from paranoid personality disorder.
People who suffer from paranoid personality disorder have delusions that their family or close friends are out to kill them. They have recurrent suspicions that spouses or lovers are being unfaithful to them.
Given everything that happened that night, defense attorneys had a pretty compelling argument.
However, prosecutors argue that JD's actions the night of the crimes weren't the work of an insane man, but rather a methodical one.
He was evil, he was dangerous, but mad and bad does not equal crazy. He stole Tashika's car, but then exchanged it at the home of his girlfriend. That flies in the face of a truly insane person. He knew what he was doing was wrong, and as many criminals, he was trying to cover his tracks.
The question now is, which side would jurors believe? On June 28th, they retired to deliberate JD's fate. 4 hours later, they returned with a verdict.
He was convicted of all 3 first-degree murders and the armed robbery of the strip joint. He got the maximum sentence in this case, a sentence of natural life.
For the victims' families, the punishment stirs up a mix of emotions.
It didn't feel like a victory at all to me. He killed 3 that night and just changed the lives of so many people.